We're going to talk about Bitcoin mining, one of my favorite subjects. Let's dive right into it. How did Texas become the mecca for Bitcoin mining? We have an awesome piece in Consensus Magazine by Jeff Wilzer, who's a great writer for CoinDesk. This piece delves into why Texas was such a popular option for Bitcoin miners over the last 2 years, how it affects the energy grid down in Texas, and how locals are reacting to Bitcoin miners moving into their neighborhoods. It's a longer piece, definitely worth checking out, but we'll kind of open the discussion here. How do you feel about mining these days? Wendy, I want to throw it over to you, get your thoughts on it. Pass around the horn a little bit.
So this is the thing, you guys. I am not a mining expert because I absolutely suck when it comes to tech, and I have no problem admitting it. I tell my audience, I tell you, I tell the internet. I can do math. Okay, believe it or not, I've got some math degrees under my belt, and that's how I learned how to trade. But mining is hard. It's hard to understand. One of the things I do know about mining is it's not as harmful to the environment as many people say that it is, and I feel like a lot of miners in the U.S. are pressed. They're very pressed to find a safe place for them to operate their business because, let's face it, we still don't really have any guidelines or regulations. The United States of America can't figure out if mining is good for the environment, if it's bad, how they can harness, safer energy to do so. And I feel like miners are just kind of going to places where they're accepted, where they can pay less taxes. There's a saying my good friend Mark Moss says, go where you're treated best. And it seems like Texas might be that place for that. It's very sad that there's not other parts in America that it's very limited to where people can go and do these types of things, especially due to the electricity costs. I know in California, when I originally got into crypto, I had some friends like, you should start mining. And I looked at the cost and I said, it scared me because it was so expensive. But I feel like Texas has become a great place for that because they have the room and they're offering to treat people better than other places. So deep in the heart of Texas.
I love to hear. Wendy looked at the prices and went, I have a question for you, Will, our mining expert, off the back of what Wendy just said. I remember we spoke about a bill that was proposed that failed to make it through the House committee that was looking into the mining industry's participation in programs that would incentivize large energy consumers like miners to sell back energy to the grid. Is that correct? Or cap the incentives they could get from turning their operations off. And there was a big hoopla around the community and legislators saying that miners are just actually making a ton of money in incentives. Where has that conversation gone? Is there still tension there in Texas?
Yeah, so there's a few bills around that in the spring months. So Texas has a 2-year legislative cycle. So every 2 years they meet and hammer out some ideas and bills that they've been working on. And they have a few weeks to pass all these things before it goes to the governor's desk. And this year there was about 4 or 5 Bitcoin mining bills that were pushed forward on both the Senate side and on the House side, and only a few actually moved forward, and most of them were positive. So there was one that had to do with flared gas and capping the amount of flared gas that was possible to be used in the state. I think the end goal was just to encourage flared gas mining. I'd have to go back and look at it. There's a few others on capping how much Bitcoin mining could be done in the state on the grid. And then there was a few other more political ones, including one to do with battery plants and how Bitcoin miners could interact together. So lots of different House bills and Senate bills. At the end of it, the legislative cycle was actually very good, favorable for Bitcoin miners. There wasn't anything that was nasty or divisive against Bitcoin miners, which is, again, a new industry in Texas. I think this really comes from the fact that Texas is a Republican-dominated state. The governor's office has welcomed Bitcoin miners famously back in 2021 after China banned Bitcoin mining. Governor Greg Abbott openly stated Bitcoin miners are welcome here, and Bitcoin miners took advantage of that. As you see in this piece from Jeff Wilzer, one of the big things Bitcoin miners want is a friendly place to operate a business with clear rules for the road. They don't just want cheap energy or high Bitcoin price. They also want really solid business practices, so they don't have any issues like they did have in China, where you just have random inspections, or your mine gets shut off randomly, or you just have problems getting workers in because of visas. In Texas, it's a little bit simpler. And so I think that is why we've seen such steady and popular interest in Bitcoin mining in Texas, because the political side of things is pretty simple there, and there's not too many surprises. Throw it back to you, Jen.
Well, what about, I heard, I had another question, but Wendy, I heard you sigh and put your hand up. So we're going to get you back in the
I was just getting, just thinking about what I'm going to eat for lunch.
Okay. Oh. Is it a taco?
You know what I just thought about? What happens if we use like the energy from gas stoves, and then that energy goes to mine Bitcoin, so we don't have to ban gas stoves or something like that?
Innovative. I don't really understand it, but
innovative
we'll
thought.
talk after.
Because I'm trolling. That's why.
Take it offline. Okay. Well, my second question is, a lot of this legislation is proposed because of the community. How do you think, I guess, or how are you seeing mining companies educate the communities on like what's actually happening here, especially when we have like Greenpeace out there saying Bitcoin mining is bad and going to boil the oceans?
Yeah, great subject. I'm actually submitting an op-ed to CoinDesk, which will hopefully run this week for part of Miner Week, talking about that very subject. More broad strokes, talking about public miners, which public miners are mining companies that publicly listed in either Canada or the US over the last few years. There's about 20 plus. So a lot of people have exposure to Bitcoin miners because they want exposure to Bitcoin in their portfolios. And so they've chosen to do that through Bitcoin mining stocks. And my piece basically goes into how there's too much marketing gimmicks in Bitcoin mining retail stocks, and it mirrors the token industry. We're just talking about WorldCoin. I think Bitcoin miners do a similar thing where they have a lot of marketing gimmicks out there. And I think that'd be better if they turn towards education. Now, there have been some really solid attempts at education, especially in Texas, because these Bitcoin miners are moving into rural areas where there's not a lot of jobs, there's a lot of energy, and there can be a lot of economic development. And there's been some like grassroots development there, right? So like the Riot team down in Rockdale, Texas, definitely does a lot of stuff with bringing people to the site, bringing in not only national media, but allowing like local visitors to come into the site. I think the Texas Blockchain Council does a really good job. They host summits during the year. They have a lot of different education initiatives in different universities. So it's growing. The issue with all of this, of course, is it's slow, and you have to teach someone about Bitcoin before you can really start teaching them about Bitcoin mining and how the energy grid works. And most people just don't want to have that conversation. So it's a slow grind. As long as there's a healthy political stance on it right now, I think that there will be continued education, and maybe 5 to 10 years time, people will be a little more positive towards it. But for right now, it's, I say generally negative, but not too negative, just a touch.
Education. Well, all our audience can educate themselves by reading Will's op-ed on CoinDesk.com. There's lots of other fascinating stories during CoinDesk's Mining Week presented by Foundry there, so you can check that out again on CoinDesk.com. I need to note that Foundry and CoinDesk are both owned by DCG, but lots of cool mining content from articles to videos to op-eds. Learn about it all.